Hey everybody, Chris Thunder Laser, and today in this video we're going to cover the Nova series, setting it up, what's in the box, and really how to plug all of this stuff in and get it set up correctly and making sure you're prepared. So once you have your Thunder Laser and you've uncrated it, you start unboxing all of your accessories, and this is kind of what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with your chiller. You're going to end up with your toolbox, your duct work, your air pump, and your exhaust fan. Now, one thing that the machine does not come with, which you're going to have to source locally or through Amazon or online somewhere, is some type of exhaust duct to get outside of your building. The Nova 24 and the Nova 35 come with a 6-inch exhaust fan, and the 51 and the 63 come with an 8-inch exhaust fan. So keep that in mind when you're looking. Now, these are called either a dryer vent duct, or you can find a range hood duct that goes outside the house. You do want to find one that has a blast gate or some type of baffle built inside so that when it's not in use, it is shut. So we don't have bugs, we don't have cold air, we don't have heat and humidity coming back into the building or into the machine. So this is something that does not come with the machine. It is sold separately, but you will want to have something like this if you're planning on a permanent solution and not just throwing the hose outside of the garage door or something. That said, this is our exhaust fan, and all of our peripherals plug directly into the back of the machine, and they turn on with the machine. Our air pump and our exhaust fan will turn on with the job. So when you plug them in, don't expect them to turn on right away. They will turn on when you start the job. Let's go over the exhaust fan real quick. The exhaust fan has arrows pointing out, away from the machine. So it is going to blow the air. It's pulling all of the exhaust fumes out of the machine from this side, and we have the duct work that goes alongside it, and we have the hose clamps to connect it. So you're going to be connecting one of these ducts to the back of the machine using a hose clamp, and then to your exhaust fan using a hose clamp. And then you have a third hose clamp that will connect to the outlet side. This is going to go to your duct that you buy from Lowe's, Home Depot, or wherever. That should come with its own clamp as well. Super simple. We're just making sure that this is flowing in the right direction. If we follow those arrows, it's going through. So pulling and then out. And we just want to make sure it is out of the house or out of the shop, so we're not having any of this recirculating in our work area. I mean, we are cutting wood and other materials, so we don't want any of that coming in. We do give you 2 pieces of duct work, and that'll be what you'll use to connect to the machine, to the fan, and then outside. The air pump. The air pump comes with a hose that will thread into the end of the pump, and then you'll just have to tighten it down slightly with an adjustable wrench or a pair of pliers. But this just spins on there, tighten it down real tight, and then just give it a quarter turn or so with a wrench. This also will be plugging into the back of the machine, and they are labeled in the back, and we'll show you that in a little bit. And then the hose, there's a spot on the back of the machine for this hose. It literally just plugs in, and it will clamp itself in there when you push it in far enough. To release it, you push the white pin in, and then you can pull this out, and I'll show you that as well. Our chiller has an alarm cable to communicate with the controller so that it knows that the water that is flowing and at the right temperature. The cables, the hoses, and the electric outlet for your chiller are inside your toolbox. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the accessories that come in the toolbox, That is listed in some of our documentation, and it changes from time to time when they're upgrading and changing some things out. So depending on when you're viewing this, I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea that something didn't come. We're usually just changing it out for a newer model or upgrading our supplies that we send with the machine. But once we open up our toolbox and go to the bottom, after we pull this tray out and we get to the bottom of the toolbox, we'll find our silicone hoses for our inlet and outlet of our chiller. And then we have our power cord for the machine, our alarm cable for the chiller, and we have our communication wires for our USB and our Ethernet. Okay, so before we get to the inside of the machine and go over some of the parts and pieces, I'd like to have the lights on and it active so that we can see some of the functions of the machine. And one thing I want to do before I do that is I want to plug it in, and I also want to hook up my air pump so I can test it, and my exhaust fan so I can test it. So I'm going to grab my power cord, which is my blue-ended, and this is a twist locking system. It's pretty cool. Going to line up my 2 tabs, slide it into my input on my power, and turn, and make sure it locks. Now that should be active, ready to go, and I can see here, this is for my air pump. So I'll grab my air pump and I will plug that in as well. And again, I'm doing this so that I can test and make sure all of my peripheral pieces of equipment are running properly before I go through the extent of connecting everything to the machine and moving it into place. And then my exhaust fan. Okay, so all of our peripherals are hooked up. I have them sitting right behind the machine, right underneath here, just so I can test and make sure everything is working properly. So let's go over to the power supply, the switches, and discuss those for a second. So over here we have our laser switch and our main switch. The main switch needs to be on first, and then you can turn on your laser switch. We do have our Ethernet port here. We also have our USB stick, which is for if we want to use our thumb drive and transfer files over to the controller that way. And then we have our USB, which is a printer cable to USB that goes into the computer. Now, before we even power this on, we need to look over a couple things. Now, we have our keys and also our thumb drive in this little baggie that is zip tied to the honeycomb. And we have another zip tie in the back here that is holding this for transportation reasons securely to its Z mechanism. This way the blade table and the honeycomb do not jump all over the place while it's being shipped. Let's go around the back real quick. And again, these are things you're going to do before you power it up. You open up the tube area. And back here you'll find that we have the tube secure with a little bit of foam. But in the back corner, depending on your machine, you're going to have this laser test from the tube manufacturer and from our factory, where we test and make sure that the spot size is good and that the pulses are good. So this is just a test for the laser tube. Now, if you have a 130 watt, there will be a dust cover that comes with it that will go on the end of your tube right there. But making sure that we get everything out of here, take out our foam and all of that stuff before we start using it. Okay, so I did a visual inspection and everything looks to be in order. now I'm going to turn on the machine and make sure that everything is working properly. So again, I want to turn on my main switch first. And if you have no response from this main switch, nothing turns on, we need to go to our emergency stop and check that, because moving this around, it can get bumped easily. It is very easy to trigger this. It's an emergency stop, so we just want to turn it. So you are turning it clockwise and it should pop right up. And once the machine turns on, it's going through its homing process where it is trying to touch our sensors, our end stop sensors, and know that it is at 0, 0 or in its home position. Once it's in its home position, it should stop, and then we can start to expand our view here real quick. Once it's in the home position, we can use the keypad to move things around, make sure that we have proper motion, that nothing shifted during transport. We can move the Z table up and down. Again, I have not removed those zip ties or that card yet. You will need to remove the card and the keys so that you can open some of the side panels. Okay, let's go inside the machine and show some of the parts and pieces. All right, so this is the side of the machine that houses almost all of your electronics. And what you need to do is use your key and open that up. Now the doors are a little bit different from model to model, and the position of some of these things are a little bit different, like with the 24. Now looking inside quickly, we can notate that our controller is in the corner over there. Our drivers for our X and Y and our Z are right here. We have noise filters for our incoming electricity. We have a 36-volt power supply, and notice that everything is pretty accessible and pretty well labeled as far as our wiring and all of that stuff. We have our door board, and this is what will stop the machine from running if you have doors open, and if you are going to test the tube and stuff like that, there is a bypass, and we have documentation on how to do all that stuff. We have our main breaker. If for some reason there is a short in the system or even a power surge, it is possible that this breaker right here is tripped. Notice that it is green. That means it is open. If we want to close this circuit, we flip it back up. We do have our main contactor, and then we have our relays that trigger all of our accessories. And we're going to run through that real quick just so that we can test our air pump and make sure all of that stuff is working. Then we have our TL timer board, and this is what controls the machine and lets the machine activate our peripherals, our fan, our high air, our low air, our rotary tool. This is the brains of the Thunder Laser. And I'm going to hit this button right here, this first button, and it's going to go through its sequence as I push the button, and we have an article listed on exactly what this is doing and how to go through and test it. But as I go through that, I'm making sure, like number 3 is going to be our fan. And I'm going to make sure that a fan is working properly, is blowing pretty well. And this way I'm comfortable with connecting my ductwork to it and getting it out of the house or my shop and moving the machine into position. I'm going to press again. And now my air assist is working. I'm going to go over to my air assist. Make sure that is up and running. Now, this is going to be our low air assist. And we can go over here and make sure. Yes, our low air assist is on. And we'll push this button one more time. The pump will remain on. The only thing that has changed is now it has triggered our high volume air assist. And then we have our air valves here that control the amount of flow for each one independently. That is our alarm system. Now that alarm system is going to run anytime that you have the flame up sensor or the heat sensor triggered. And that's just something to know. You can test it out and make sure that everything is working. Back to 1. 1 is going to be your green light. 2 is going to be your red light, making sure all of that is functioning. And we'll just cycle through again. And no lights on our digital display here means that it is back into normal mode. All right, on the back side we have 2 doors, one of which will have our LPSU, which is our laser power supply, in the back. We have our laser power supply, our high voltage connector, that white one with the red wire. We have our incoming power, and then we have our opto board, which is an optical isolation so that there's no feedback going. This is a very, very high voltage. This is what powers the laser tube. So we're isolating the communication wires going to the controller. Now this is not on yet. We have not turned on the laser power because we have no water in our chiller yet. Close this one. And let's open this one. And nothing here. Okay, so moving on to the chiller, we have our power cord that is going to connect into here and then into our water chiller power connection right here. Let me see if I can move the camera just a little bit. There we go. So same idea as the main power. We are going to plug this one into the chiller and then match up your 2 little nub ends on there. Twist and click, and now we have power to the chiller. We have an outlet and an inlet on the chiller, and we have an inlet and an outlet on the actual machine. Now they're labeled green to green, outlet of the machine to the inlet of the chiller. Make sure you take off these covers. And orange to orange, water in on the machine to water outlet on the chiller. And then we have our alarm output plug. Now there's 2 different size plugs. One is much larger than the other, and it really makes a lot of sense if you just take a look at them and match them up. And there is a little track on the inside that it'll only fit in one way. Screw it down and you're good there. And then same thing on the machine. Slide it in, screw it down, good to go. Now the blue hose that is from the air assist goes into the air assist right here. And this is a little spring-loaded clip for when you want to remove it. You would just push that down and pull the pipe out. But for installing the air, we're just sliding it in, push it, give it a good push, give it a little tug too, and it shouldn't come out. and that's in and secure. Again, if you want to take it out, we push this white or grayish, you'll hear it click a little bit, and then you can slide this out. So it's just a compression fitting. Push it in, locks it in there, push that white piece back, you can slide it right out. Very easy to do. On the chiller, we have our drain. We have our glass window for the sight of if we have our water low or filled. And typically I will put about a gallon, almost 2 gallons of distilled water into the chiller, check it, turn it on, allow it to run for a little bit to get all the water in the hoses and in the tube, and then I will top it off to make sure that it is up to this full line. Anywhere in this yellow is a good spot to be in. So once we have our water filled up, we can go ahead and turn on the power for our chiller. And I'll make a quick note that the toolbox comes, inside the toolbox there's some zip ties, and I like to make sure I have my water inlet and outlet pushed all the way back onto the barbed fitting, and then I put a zip tie on so it cannot get yanked off. That's just something I like to do just out of precaution. It's not necessary because these barbed fittings are pretty good. They'll hold that pipe on there, but just an extra measure of safety. You'll need 2 gallons of distilled water, and I usually use a funnel when I'm filling. And at this point, I'm going to make sure that my switch is on here, my power switch. And let's come over here to the other side. And our laser switch is going to control our laser power supply and our chiller. So we'll hit the main switch first and get it fired up, let it go through its process of homing, and don't be alarmed because the chiller is going to alarm. So once we have that turned on, the chiller should make some beeping noises, and that just indicates that there is trying to start the flow of water. Once it notices flow, then it should be good. Now keep in mind, once you turn it on and it starts to flow, our water level dropped to about half of the normal. So we're gonna have to fill it. We're displacing water from the tank in the chiller into the tubes, into these silicone pipes, and then into the laser tube as well. So let's just make sure that we top it off and make sure we have enough water. The more water we have in there, the better cooling, heat dissipation we'll have as well. All right, here we are on the left side of the machine. And taking a look inside, we have our back side of our air. So our air coming into the machine, our power to our chiller, our hoses going to our tube, and our alarm cable that will go over to our controller as an alarm for safety if the water is not flowing, or if this triggers any type of an alarm, it'll trigger the machine not to run. We have our Z motor, and then we have our solenoids for triggering our high and low air assist. So now we know where just about everything is on this machine. So when you first get the machine, it doesn't come with the 2-inch head calibrated to the bed of the machine. So what I like to do before I even get started, I will disconnect our air hose by pushing down. Again, this is the same way that it works in the back of the machine. So we're pushing down on this little tab here, a little ring, push down, pull up, and that disconnects our air hose from our laser lens tube. I'm turning my brass knob, and then I'm sliding this out. Now, there is an Allen key on here, and what I want to do is I want to release the tension on it so it's easy to slide, so I can calibrate this head to the bed for autofocus. So in our toolkit we have our Allen keys, and we'll just find the proper one, and I'm going to say it is that one. So what I want to do is just turn this a little bit, loosen it so it is able to slide. I'm going to return the laser head into position, but slide it all the way up and tighten it down. Now what I want to do is go into my menu, and I'm going to select autofocus by hitting enter. It's already highlighted. It's the first thing that's highlighted. Makes it nice and easy. Hit enter, and the bed's going to raise up until it reaches our sensor and crosses that plane, kind of like a garage door opener. When you cross that plane, it'll stop the door. Well, same idea. Once we cross the plane between the two sensors here, it'll stop our laser Z-bed from moving up. At this point, I'm going to calibrate the 2-inch laser head to the Z table or the honeycomb on our machine. And all I have to do to do that is take my clear piece of acrylic. It's a 1/4 inch, so it's about 5 millimeters. I'm going to place it underneath the head. I'm going to allow the head to drop down and touch that. I'm going to lock that in, and now I'm going to slide my collar up and tighten that down. And now for autofocus. The laser head is calibrated to the bed. So in actuality, we should be able to go down a little bit, slide our material over, and as long as our material is in between these two sensors, it's going to pick the material up. So I will autofocus again, just to double check that it is seeing the material and that I did calibrate it correctly. So menu, autofocus, enter. So if it's calibrated correctly, you should be able to slide that right back underneath. Now, take into consideration that if you have a little bit of bowing on the board, then the sensor is going to pick up that bow first, and it may be a little out of focus. And that's why we have these adjustments here where we can move it up and down. But the whole idea is that we don't want head crashes, so we want to calibrate this lens tube so that when the Z table is all the way up, we're not hitting it. And at this point, again, if I do autofocus, it's going to stop well before it gets to my laser head, so I'm in the clear. It's not going to head crash into the honeycomb. One thing I like to do before I even get started connecting to the computer is test my laser pulse. And to do that, we need to have the door closed, or we can go down to the door board and basically deactivate it, and it'll stay deactivated until we restart the machine. So I can hit the button here, and that will turn the door board off, basically bypassing our sensors so that we can test. And I will hit the pulse button and make sure that I am getting some type of a pulse from the laser, just to double check and make sure everything is up and running and functional. And now we can move on to taking our gold card and going through the Lightburn download and setup process. We must enter our gold card settings and download all of our information from the USB to our Lightburn to make sure everything is up and running well and communicating.